Andrew, welcome to Media Scripted.
Thank you, Annie. Lovely to be here.
You spent a while, I don't want to say decades, but a while at the center of branded content and influencer marketing. And as a global chairman of BCMA, you've seen this category maturing from something perhaps many people treated as experimental into what I think now is a serious part of the global content economy. When you look at branded content today, compared with 10 or 20 years ago, has anything fundamentally changed? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, everything has changed really in that period of time. As you say, back in 2003, when I sort of started my journey into branded content as was, and now branded entertainment, there was a real pushback from brands that didn't really understand what branded content can bring. And that has really fundamentally changed because now brands think about content first. And that's really, I think, how brands have really taken this on board. And, there was a lot of experimentation, and actually, there should still be experimentation. But I think it's a real learning curve in terms of how to do content brilliantly. And it takes time to do it. So, yeah, there has been fundamental changes, but I think that there has been a real positive change in terms of what brands are doing now.
Are we really talking about much broader branded entertainment economy that we're building?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about entertainment. It always has been. It's just that we got hung up with the word of content. First and foremost, you have to entertain. If you want people to stay with you, you've got to engage them. And by being entertaining, you're going to have a much better result than if you don't. So I think it's how that sort of has evolved over time. And I think that's really important, how brands now think about it.
I'm thinking now about a standard model, the buy media. So is the stronger opportunity now for brands to earn attention by making something people actually want to spend time with?
I think, the world, people don't want to be interrupted anymore. Social media has really put pay to that. When you rewind a few years, decades, is that brands were created in agencies, ad agencies. Now anyone can create a brand wherever they are. So brands have really lost that control. That's what has really changed. But what content and branded entertainment can do can allow brands to take back that control. They can really use that to encourage people to buy more products and services from them, but in a much more engaging way. And that's really the fundamental change.
Yeah, so if brands are no longer just buying attention around entertainment, but helping create the entertainment itself, the whole economic model starts to change. So how seriously should the media industry take brands as a funding partners for entertainment?
Seriously, indeed. The model for traditional ad revenue is only going one way. It's only going to decline. And, we have seen the media, the publishers really have taken hold of this with the New York Times have their own studio. Obviously, we had Guardian Labs in the UK. Um, so, we are seeing this happen. But I think a lot of the commissioners, particularly in the broadcast sector, really don't embrace or haven't embraced the funding from brands because they don't want to lose their control over the commissioning process. Now, not everyone has this view, but I think it's something that we need to help to change that view. And we have to work with brands because, and I think we've talked about this before, brands really are the new commissioners. They are the ones that have the investment. They're the ones with the money. So, of course, they're going to probably still buy advertising for the next few years. But actually, when you look at the proportion of that expenditure, the creation part of it is going to rise and the paid for part of it is going to decline. So it's a real wake up call to the media owners to really take hold of this.
I agree, but where do you see the biggest commissioning and commercial opportunity now? Is it the original IP? Is it the existing IP, creator-led formats, maybe microdramas, and is it something else?
Well, I mean, it's probably a combination of all those things. I mean, you mentioned micro dramas, the vertical dramas. That's a really hot area at the moment because people haven't got time. They want something that's a really quick fix for them. Obviously, P&G are experimenting with this with their latest developments. But really, where the real value is in IP. However, that it can be a minefield because if you're a production company and you're creating all this amazing content, but is being funded by a brand, well, who owns that IP? That's where some of the conflict can be because as a producer, you want to own that because when that format gets sold around the world, you need to earn your money through what you've created. However, if you have a brand partner that is putting in, let's say, half the money, 50%, well, surely 50% of that IP should be owned by the brand. It's not quite that simple. We do this because we do it day in, day out. But if you're a brand manager or a brand director or CMO, you have to answer to the CEO to tell them how much product you're going to sell or how many services and what that's going to do to the bottom line. That's sometimes where the challenges are, in the boardroom. And it's about speaking the right language because the language of brands is different from the language of the boardroom often.
So yes, I wanted to ask about AI generated content. People call this AI slop. Is it too much content from too many brands on too many platforms? Most of it sort of fighting for attention rather than earning it. Do you think that AI solves the problem or accelerates it?
A little while ago when we went from a very limited amount of choice in the TV market to hundreds and hundreds of channels. It is about a question of choice. If it's not great quality and it doesn't appeal to you, you're not going to watch it. So there is going to be a growth in AI content, but the brand side of things, I think brands must be very careful in terms of how they're generating AI content, if they are. So, for example, I know that Diageo for some of their brands uses the AI technology because if you've got a bottle in an ad or a piece of content, and you have to adapt that for 120 markets, AI is really good for doing that because the brand is pretty much the same in every country. All you're doing is changing the messaging. So from that perspective, AI is amazing, and they really, really are using that technology. However, if you're a brand that has different um, aspects to your global content that needs a lot more work, then AI might not be the best way to do it. So again, it's about the consumer choice. If consumers think it's something they want to engage with, they will. But I think AI has to be treated in a way with respect. I still think you need that human input to create the best content. Now, that may change over time, but I think where we are now, I think brands need to understand that. As I said, brands need to understand the difference between the AI generated content and the human content. And actually, it could be a hybrid of that too, as well.
Creators have been much better understanding that attention is not just something you buy, it's something you build with an audience over time. And they do not just broadcast to a market, they build with the community. At least brands understand that difference yet? Do they know how to build this belonging and affinity?
I think some do, and I think some probably don't. I think this is about authenticity. This is about trust. I was looking at some statistics before we had the call today, was about the fact that people trust creators more than they trust brands, in certain instances, because the creators are coming from that place of passion, often driven by their own experiences, and it's generally a more authentic messaging that they're putting out, just telling stories really from their own experiences. Whereas brands ultimately need to sell stuff, so they're going to come at it from a point of view of um, the messaging will have to lead on to making a sale or making something in return. So I think that's always the same, because even if you look at some of the way that the on-demand content services now, is that they're now having advertising breaks, because that's the value exchange. You might get the service for free, but you've got to pay for it in the fact you've got to, they need you to watch these ads. So that's the exchange. Now, that's not, you know, that's not really, I think, how brands should be approaching this, because that's still painful and that's still interrupting. So I don't think that works.
What do brands still get wrong when they work with creators?
No, I don't. I always think it's a learning curve as well. You're not going to get everything right all at once. I also say that you often learn more from things that don't work than things that do. I think it's all about due diligence. It's all about uh, choosing the right partners and making sure that you have the right agreements in place. This is a contractual way of doing business, and I think people tend to run to execution before they think about the problems they're trying to solve. And that's often been the case. I think it's all about having a really uh, well thought through strategic plan and implementation. There's going to be tactical opportunities, but I think it's about having the wider strategic view for how the creator is going to help you sell more of your products. So, as long as you've got that in mind, because people get carried away. They get carried away with the talent. They want to get involved in the process often. I always say leave it to the experts. That's what I always say.
Deepest value is not just in viewing, it's in the affiliation. So people do not just watch, they belong. So should brands stop asking, like, where is the audience that we need to attract, and start asking, I guess, where do people already belong, we can, that we can earn a place to be there.
There's always going to be that community around it. But I think you're right. I think you have to earn your place, get yourself involved in that community, because if you don't, you'll get found out very quickly, and there may be a negative reaction. So I think if you've built that community, um, decide what you want to do with it. Don't just do it as a one-off. I think it's about building that journey. Take people on that journey with you and do it over the long term. I think the problem now is we're in a very short-term thinking. The market and brands particularly want return on their investment. And unfortunately, content, branded entertainment brand doesn't necessarily work in that way. It's a much longer timeline. I see it more as an investment rather than a cost.
A lot of value may just not show up as neat, sort of short-term campaign metrics. So what does the industry still get wrong when it tries to measure branded entertainment?
Research and measurement is often thought about at the end of the process rather than right at the beginning, which is where it should be. Because as you're working out what you're trying to do with your marketing, you should have that measurement already thought about. You should have that briefed out. What we had to do was build a framework for that measurement, because pretty much every branded content, branded entertainment campaign is different. So you don't end up with a single metric. You have a series of different metrics that would show you how effective that content has been. Or what tends to happen is that brands and their agencies would often say, well, we already measure our campaigns. Yeah, but you're not measuring the right things, because
That's not a campaign anymore.
instead of talking about return on investment, they came up with this term called ROMI, which was return on marketing investment. So instead of turning it into like a sales perspective. They said, well, how effective has our marketing been? And actually, you're right. It's going to be a longer term activity. So how are we going to measure that over time? And I think that's something that is sadly lacking, and has been for the last few years.
Our conversation, and especially timely, entertainment is being pulled into the center of the content market. And MIPCOM's launch of MIP brand work seems like a very clear signal, which I'm especially excited about, as you know. So,
Me too.
how significant is that brands, agencies, creators, right holders are now being brought into the same deal making environment?
I mean, to me, that's the game changer. It really is a real shift in how brands can now get involved. It's exactly what we're talking about today. In fact, I spoke to Doug Scott, who's leading that at MIP. I was on a call with him yesterday and discussing exactly how that was going to work, and it's going to be very exciting because actually getting everyone together. And in fact, we started doing that at MIP London, where the brands and the producers of the content were sort of sitting down in the same room. And you know what? I rewind to 2003 when the BCMA was formed. It's exactly, why we started the organization, because there was no forum where brands could talk to creators directly, and that was exactly, what we felt was necessary. Um, Fast forward 20 odd years, and we're now doing it. Well, it's taken a while, but the good news is we're going to be doing it. So I think that's really exciting. I think it's brands need to have a bit more of an open mind. I think it's all the world of you know test and learn. I think that's really something that we've lost in the marketing industries. Invest a small amount and learn from it, and look at what happened. You have to evolve. You have to adapt. You've got to take people on that journey. I think making sure everyone is agreed, everyone knows where they're going, and you do it together. You've got to have that shared responsibility.
And one thing we keep saying that brands should have a mindset change is also the entertainment industry and the commissioners now working with brands. I think that there's education there as well.
Everyone wants to know what's in it for them. It has to be mutually beneficial. We don't just want to take the brand money and run. We want to create something that is valuable.
I normally finish every discussion with a what I call rapid fire round. What would be the one branded entertainment campaign genuinely moved the whole category forward?
Well, for me, it was BMW films. The BMW film series of 2000, 2001. That was the catalyst for me personally that brought me into the world of branded content, now entertainment, because I realized that, a company like BMW that took the decision to put $25 million into making films about their product was an extraordinary leap of faith. They used the best directors. They had Guy Ritchie, Madonna was in one, James Brown. Look at the people. Clive Owen started his career in Hollywood. It was extraordinary. There were 7-minute films that were just broke the mold. This was even before YouTube started, and people used to start the download overnight because it will take all night for it to download. But they got 100 million downloads. It actually increased the sales of BMW cars by double-digit growth. It was extraordinary. And I said to Jim, Jim McDowell, his name was, and I said, Jim, how did you get it through the management? And how did you get them to agree with it, to do it? And he said, you know what, Andrew? I never told them. I just thought, oh, that's fantastic. But I also know Bruce Gilson, who was the director at Fallon, who made the films as well, and he's a very good close friend of mine, and he's a global advisor for BCMA, and he's got the great stories that he tells me, and You know, that is, it was such an amazing um, time to be. I would have loved to it, but to me that was the tipping point. That's what helped me to. I went off and launched my own branded content agency. You know, I went in. I helped to form the BCMA. You know, that was it. That was what BMW did. So that to me was where this all started. And I'm absolutely delighted to have you as a trusted colleague, and it's a people business. And actually having people with that shared knowledge, shared passion is absolutely what BCMA is. It's like a family, and I'm very glad that we have you as our part of our family.
Thank you so much. And Andrew, this has been brilliant. And thank you for helping unpack why branded entertainment now matters, not just to marketeers, but to the wider media economy. So really grateful for this.
Absolute pleasure. So thank you for inviting me.